Welcome to Mystican Identity, the podcast that invites you to discover unity in every tradition. And in each episode, we explore the timeless wisdom woven through mystic teachings, religions, and spiritual philosophies, all leading us to a deeper connection with one another. The views and reflections shared are personal experiences and are honestly intended just for reflection. They're moments from my own journey, shared with honesty and not intended for instruction. They don't represent official positions or universal truths, but are offered as one perspective among many. Well, greetings. Thank you for joining me with another episode of Mystican Identity. And once again, I'm the Mystic. And this episode actually has a lot of exciting elements, at least for me, that led up to this being recorded. And it all revolves around something that's been kind of like nagging at me lately. It's this conflict that I'm having that keeps coming up. And it keeps resurfacing. And it's this one of, why am I doing this? Why am I doing a podcast? Why am I doing a YouTube channel and YouTube shorts and Instagram material? I tend to get lost in that a lot. I think it's a lot. Maybe not as much as I think I do. The initial reason for doing this was when I got out of the hospital, or my incident. The staff there influenced me so much with their compassion and with their capacity to help people that I wanted to help people back with my journey. And I'd gone through a number of things that I considered. I was thinking of maybe volunteering somewhere or volunteering at the hospital that I spent time with. And ultimately, there was this thing that just kept resonating in my mind, almost like a gong, kind of sustaining. And it was to do a podcast or social media in some way and just share my experiences. Where the conflict has been coming in is that lately I've got caught up in the whole numbers game. And that is that I find myself constantly, as soon as I need my cell phone, I'm checking the YouTube Studio app to see if I've got any new subscribers or if I've got a like on my new post, or maybe there's a comment. And I'm kind of caught up in this game. And that's where it all kind of kicks in, because as soon as I check it and I look at the numbers and, well, it hasn't climbed in a little bit. And I look at that and that voice comes back and says, but, this isn't what it's really about. Then that ever clever voice comes back and says, that's just a cop-out. You're just coming up with a cop-out for numbers. And here we start this whole battle all over again. Ultimately, the question is, well, why did I start doing this in the first place? Truth is, if that I did start this in the first place just to help people, hopefully, that's the intent, with my experiences, then that should be enough. Let's say I'm able to help 10 people. Well, I'm good. And, so it really does come back to that. But that's where this whole game is playing out. Now, this is something where the divine in that still small voice has been nurturing through this process with, remember, that's not what this is all about. Go back to the beginning. But that's when this week, the divine's influence turned from that nurturing into a little bit more of like a silent scream, so to speak. And it really resonated today when I woke up and I wanted to check my numbers again. And the voice said, okay, this project isn't about numbers. This project all along has been about you. It's about you. In a sense, what it's really about is breaking the fourth wall. See, coming out of the hospital, there's a lot that I'm not wonderful with when it comes to doing something like this. The thoughts, the ideas, the meditations, the advice from the divine comes in an instant. Just like that. And I know it, and I understand it, and it makes so much sense to me. the process of converting that into words for others isn't so great. And it's there that I need the experience. I need to put that into practice. Once the divine pointed out that this project is about me, I realized that this is very much part of what I call the spiritual gym. There's a podcast I have planned, and I keep bumping it back, but it's basically describing my spiritual life is now more like really what my job is supposed to be. That's my real job. And I want to do a podcast episode where I put together like a job description for what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, what that does is it converts my job, my physical daily job, into essentially my spiritual gym. And it's where I get a lot of working out. And if you think of a gym, it's kind of cool because there's all these different pieces of equipment to work out and isolate parts that you really want to target and make better. Well, I'm going to dive into how my actual workplace is a spiritual gym with different machines to exercise different parts that the divine wants me to make stronger. This podcast, the YouTube channel, the shorts, they're all part of the gym, the spiritual gym. And this is one of those parts that I have to exercise, that converting from head to voice. And I got to put that into practice. And so that's when I say that the divine saying this project is about you. It's not meant to be some egoic way. It's more of a transformative way. And this is part of the training. Essentially what I'm being shown is that the entire human experience is essentially a spiritual gym. That every part of it is designed to strengthen some part of me that needs to be strengthened and toned. And this podcast, well, it's just one of the machines. But the funny thing is that even when I had that thing from the divine that said, this is about you, this is your training, this is strengthening at the spiritual gym, I had an aha moment. Yes, now I get it. Now I see what I haven't been doing. And then that thought comes right back. So if you do this, you'll get more subscribers and more views and more clicks and more likes, and it starts all over again. And it's hilarious. If anything, I've started to be able to catch that faster, and it's kind of turned into a bit of a game now. But when I do get lost in it, I'm right back to, why am I doing this? But it's very interesting with that voice that says, this is the one. This will do it. After this episode, it's just going to go huge and people are going to follow. And this is what's been missing. I like to think of that as like a little demon, but I just call it an imp, a little imp that likes to just, take any moment and turn it into, this is what this could be. Instead of living in the now, instead of living in the present, instead of being conscious, and just knowing what to be in that moment, it's always, this will get me that. It's with that I was given a memory of a story that I'm sure many are familiar with. It's from the Bible, but other beliefs have very similar stories. And that one would be the story of Jesus being tempted in the wilderness when he went to meditate. And as he's meditating, there's that voice. Now it's in the Bible, it says, and Satan tempted him. And the first temptation was, you've been out in the wilderness, you must be hungry. Why don't you turn these stones into bread and feed yourself? Now that seems harmless enough. It's actually not a bad suggestion, right? But what it is it's taking away from the point of the meditation. The point of the meditation is to be with the divine, and even something very innocent such as taking a moment to step out, turn some loaves into bread and eat them is still pulling out of that presence with the divine. And of course, there's other temptations that follow. I think the one that speaks specifically to me is the one where the devil takes him to a very high mountain, shows him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor, and says, all this I will give you if you just bow down and worship me. And of course, we know the end, that Jesus says, "Get away from me, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." And see, that's where I started to draw in some relativity. Here I am trying to do something with the direction of helping others with my spiritual journey, with all of its flubs and with all of its good accomplishments. But I'm getting distracted by all of this. I will give you all of this. You can have lots of views. You can have lots of subscribers. You can have clicks and all of this stuff. And I guess when I really think about it, when he says, if you bow down and worship me, I guess that would be the same as I can have all the clicks. I can have all the subscribers as long as I do whatever it is to go that direction, to be that attention-getting person, I guess. Not that I'm, knocking anybody that has success. That has nothing to do with those comparisons. For those who have hit it out of the park, way to go. What an accomplishment. Very, very cool. And it must feel amazing. But for me, I have to come back to that one pointed part where I shouldn't be drawing myself out for a different type of end game, a different type of outcome. And so I thought it was super groovy that the divine shared that, kind of provided me with that memory of that story that I knew. Thought, it's kind of neat how what Jesus went through in the desert is very similar to what you go through, even when you meditate. And I had to think about that and realize that does happen to me when I meditate. It just happened this morning. I'm in a moment of bliss. I'm in a moment where I'm just not distracted by thought. And I don't know how long I'm into that blissful moment I get when that voice creeps up, that little imp. You're doing it. You got there. This is it. And then I'm pulled out. Even this morning, while I was meditating, there was honestly a thought, how many hours has it been since you've been eating? Maybe you should see the whole, what's wrong with food? There's nothing wrong with it. You're right, but it's pulling me out of my meditative state. What's wrong with clicks and views and subscribers? There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fantastic for anybody to achieve success in that manner. But that's not what my intent is supposed to be. See, that's where the whole game starts to come about. But even then, get this. Once I had that realization of the story of the temptation in the wilderness, it came to me that that should be what I do as the podcast. It was divine intervention, just what a mystic wants. And I am supposed to do a podcast on this today because this is what's happening. It's in the now. And that's the other part that I'm finding, is that really the meditative process is teaching me how to be present, conscious, here and now. With all of those distractions that I get and those thoughts about whether it's what I'm going to eat or if I'm going to have a protein drink or what I'm going to do later, they're pulling me out of the present. And that's part of the spiritual gym, is learning how to tame these wandering thoughts of mine, bring me back to one-pointedness, and be more aware and present. So let's see. This is what happened. When I started to piece all of this together, I compared my meditation to that of Jesus, my podcast to his temptation, my craving for food with his temptation of craving for food. Everything started to align for this particular episode. I mean, that's got sacred groove written all over it. That is great, and that's what I wanted to run with. Of course, once I had that idea in mind, that little imp came back. And this, because you're doing it with this spiritual groove, this will be the one that gets subscribers and you'll get clicks and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it starts taking this snowballing effect and getting away from me. There it is again, and I'm back in the battle again. Why are you doing this? It's a spiritual workout. And I'm guessing that spiritual workout is also part of learning how to catch it. Along with that came yet another thought of distraction. See how quickly it works? It adjusts. The imp is the absolute perfect recognizer of a change of state and being like, yeah, but I'm over here. Just whenever you go to dodge, it's there. Hello. Hello. Ready to get you. It almost feels like one of those scenarios. I know I've been caught in this, and I know a few other people might be able to relate to this, but it always seems to happen at like a mall or a restaurant. When you kind of like you're going a certain direction, and I should put it in first person, where I've been going in a certain direction, and all of a sudden, due to some circumstance, boom, I'm now face to face with a stranger. And very nicely, I'll go to the right to get out of your way. Well, they go to their left. So now we're still looking at each other just off to the side. Oh, sorry. So you move, and for a few moments, it becomes this very hilarious, this back and forth of two people that can't get out of each other's way because they're trying to be nice and compassionate and helpful. But still, you're at this moment where no matter what you do, this other person is still there. I'm going to go here. Well, there they are. Well, that's the imp in the spiritual practice. Because I brought myself, after that example from Christ being tempted, I brought myself back to saying, okay, just do it. Don't anticipate subscribers. Don't anticipate anything. Just be. Just do it. Just live it. The imp comes back. Maybe it's because your stuff's not that interesting. I mean, let's be serious. It's spiritual stuff. That's not high ranking on the popularity charts. Nobody is going to podcasts and YouTube for someone's spiritual journey. I mean, it pales in comparison to a lot of other things. Now the down game begins. Yeah, I guess you're right. Really isn't much room for me to be doing stuff like this. I mean, it's true. So there isn't really much presence for this, and I really shouldn't expect too many people to be interested, and maybe I should just wrap up the whole thing altogether. That's when the divine came back to me, almost came to my rescue. A lot of times, when these things happen, I look back at my childhood, and there was this, and I don't know if this is something that still currently happens, but in cartoons, there used to be this classic thing in like Looney Tunes where someone would be trying to make a decision, and there'd be like poof, an angel on one shoulder and poof, the devil on the other, whispering into the individual's ear as to what to do. And it's funny how that's so comical back then, but it was a great way for that artist to really draw out what it's kind of like. Because the divine came back to keep me centered. And just said, well, what's your favorite story, religious story? And I thought, well, I've got several. There's the Bhagavad Gita. There's the story of Siddhartha becoming the Buddha. Love that one. I love that. What's your favorite story, like, in the Bible? Easy. The Bible, my favorite story is the book of Job. That's my favorite one. All right, well, let's take a look at that. Because really, in itself, it's not a very interesting story. I mean, think about it. It's a long, drawn-out story about a man who pretty much loses all of his possessions. All right, so he loses his cows, loses his wife, loses his children, loses everything else. And at this point, yes, there is an easy joke I could slip in about this being like a 1980s country song. But it's just a little too easy to go with that one. But then there's his friends come and give him advice about what he did wrong and he's being punished. And really, when you break down the whole story, it's not really gripping. And in the end, the divine reveals itself to Job. Job learns some valuable lessons, and his stuff gets restored, thus providing that Job, through this enlightening experience, received rewards for being enlightened. It's really kind of weird because in a way, I can look at a period of time in my life when I had kind of like a Job-like experience, and really I do. There was a year and a half that I went through, and really there was kind of like this thing about it where, in a Job-like sense, I thought my life and the blueprint of it was doing exactly what it should do. It was following all of the normal paths that people follow. You got done college. Maybe some people have to go camping at least once or twice so that they can say they went camping once. That was me. Maybe some people go to Europe to find themselves or backpack or wherever it might be. They come back, they find a significant other, they get married, and da-da-da-da-da. Everything goes according to the blueprint. Well, I had that at one point in time as well. And I was in school, training for a career path, and it was a promising career path. While I was in school, I started to get a little bit of tragedy. One was that my brother, his life was ended unexpectedly. And that was a huge shift in my world, in my universe. Really, really hard to deal with. Took me years to find some kind of balance with that. But a month after his passing, my grandfather died. So now there's that extra weight. It just kind of sits, and it's a readjustment to looking at the human experience. At that point in time, just with those two things, my vehicle was stolen as well. And I required my vehicle to get to this school to do training. So now all of a sudden I had those two things plus this freedom to get back and forth to my destination, which was removed. Fortunately, I was able to rely on one of my fellow students to carpool back and forth, but still that freedom was taken away, and now I was also looking for a way to get a new vehicle and dealing with insurance. Because of all of these elements, my mind wasn't focused. I was very, very upset, depressed, and my training didn't work out. I started missing training. I started failing tests, and I failed that part of my training. Ultimately, the employer that I was with that required that training let me go because I failed my training. So now I had to find a new job while still looking for a car, and it's kind of difficult to find yourself a job without a vehicle, and I needed a vehicle, but I didn't have a job, and it's kind of hard to get a loan to get the car when you don't have a job. Well, fortunately, I was able to get myself like a surface level job, enough to pay the bills till I found something more that I wanted to do. And once I found that, my grandmother passed away. I had a lot of funerals that year, and it really started to affect me because I started to feel like something had to do with me. It became weird how I just thought that anything that surrounded me was going to have trouble, and so I became very withdrawn. Didn't really want to get involved with meeting new people or going to places or hanging out with people because I really thought in some way I was cursed. And I know that sounds really weird, but I did. Shortly after that, one of my uncles passed away unexpectedly as well. And with all that, there was so much conflict and trouble, and I was off in my own little universe of whatever I was going through. I really zoned out. Well, it eventually led to my marriage failing, so that fell apart too. Now, there were bright moments through all of that, and there were people to assist me and help me with wonderful, compassionate hearts, but there was so much on the other side of the ratio that it really felt like everything was falling apart, very much like Job. To top it all off, while I was trying to get a little bit better, then my dog passed away too, and that just ripped me apart. When I started to realize this, I realized, my goodness, wow, I guess I do kind of have like a Job-like scenario in my life too. So that's when the divine stepped in and brought me back about the story of Job. Because I realized, in a way, that's me. It's not an action-packed story, but it's a real one. It's a relevant one. A story of someone walking through doubt, distraction, discouragement, a lot of questions, and finally arriving at a deeper knowing. Now that happened many years ago, but it's now that I'm finding that that story is finding some relevance for me. And it's a spiritual understanding that kind of transcends. So that's when the divine stepped in and said, well, now that's two stories from the Bible that you know that aren't just stories anymore. See, I'd been reading everything linear, from start to finish through the Bible, and treating everything as linear stories that happen one after another. And it kind of read them almost like Lord of the Rings or Dune. But they aren't just stories anymore. I'm living them. These stories are mirrors. I'm looking at mirrors of my experience. And that brought me this huge sense of peace and belonging. It meant that I'm not alone in this. The path that I'm walking on has been shared by others. They've done the path before me, and there will be people who do the path after me. The stories we read, whether it be the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible, they're written to reflect our stories, and then we can add our experience on top of those. So I came back to this. The podcast isn't about getting views. It's about strengthening the spiritual muscle of presence and learning how to be an effective communicator. And through doing these and sharing my experiences and looking for things during the day that I can make into relative stories for others, it puts me in a place of presence and consciousness. So now this becomes more of an all-day workout because I'm working out being present and conscious. It's about noticing the thoughts that want validation and then gently just releasing them. This is my experience, my journey. I'm learning how to be. It's about letting the divine teach me through the practice of creating. It's about resisting less and being more. And I considered this to be a revelation, a breakthrough, a big, huge leap. And as I did, once again, that little imp came up and said, now that you know this, this is what will get you da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Never stops. That crazy little imp. It's crazy. It's bananas. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. I had to bring this book down with me to do this podcast recording because this is where that sacred groove comes in that just is so awesome. It's like the icing on a cake. I had this podcast all prepared, ready to go, the idea ready to go, but I ran into a little bit of a problem, and the problem was that I had also put in a load of laundry while I was getting ready to do the podcast. And even though I was ready to go, the load of laundry was on a spin cycle. The room isn't that far away from me, but the microphone would have picked it up and it would have been really annoying. So I knew I had a little bit of a wait. And I figured, well, I just started reading a book by Ram Dass. I've never read this book before. It was actually given to me as a gift. And I had to wait on reading it because I was just finishing up the Dhammapada, and I've been anxious to get started on this one. So it's called Paths to God, Living the Bhagavad Gita by Ram Dass. And so far, I am loving this book. It is wonderful. So what I'm going to do is while that load is finishing up, I'm just going to continue reading this book by Ram Dass. And so I went, got it, picked it up, and I just picked up where I left off. I flipped the page, and this is what was there. And let's just see how much relevance this was that I needed at this moment in time. I'm going to read this right out of the book, but This literally was the next thing that was coming up for me to read, and I had no clue this was coming up. Like I said, this is my first time reading this book, and I'm going to read it right from the book. Clearly, I'm not going to be as good as Ram Dass, but I'll try to give it some kind of honor as well. For me, it's still a surprise, even though I can see the connections after the fact. Here's a little example. Maybe I'm invited to give a lecture in some small town somewhere. I won't really know what leads me to accept that particular invitation, but I do. I go there, I speak to the audience, and they don't seem particularly interested in what I have to say. I think to myself, what am I doing here? Maharaji, what on earth did you have in mind? I finish my talk and I take a taxi to the airport. I've got half an hour before my flight leaves, so I'll go in to have a cup of coffee. I sit down and somebody comes over and says, "May I share this table?" "Certainly, sit down." Then we look into each other's eyes and there it is. There's the connection that holds the whole meaning of the trip. In that moment, I know, oh, far out. So that's what I'm doing in this town. Isn't that so groovy? It's the very, very similar experience that I'm having. What am I actually doing here? No one seems to be too receptive. I'm not like raking in the numbers, but there is a purpose, and the purpose wouldn't be accomplished if I didn't follow through with action. I loved that part when I got the book, and I felt really the best way to honor what's been going on with me was to actually record this podcast. It sincerely feels to me like there's a reason why these things are all coming together at one point, and it's in relation to this podcast. So in conclusion, and I'm going to try and wrap this up the best that I can, is that maybe the real meaning of all this isn't about the numbers for the podcast or the posts or the metrics or whatever it might be. The analytics, the algorithm seems to be such the catchword nowadays. So maybe it's not any of that stuff. It's just waiting for a single moment of connection. Perhaps one listener, one heart, one silent far out. I'd love that. I would love for somebody to listen to my stuff and say, far out. Ha! That's got to be one of the grooviest things ever. So walk with me. Let's keep training together in this spiritual gym. Let's strengthen our presence, not our profiles. Let's remind each other that we don't need to be profound. We just need to be present. So thank you for joining me on this exploration of Mystican Identity, where we uncover the unity within every tradition. And I hope today's journey inspired a sense of connection with the shared tapestry of spiritual wisdom. And as we reflect on these insights, please remember what unites us at our core. And if today's episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe and share it with others on a similar path. So join me next time as we continue to uncover the wisdom that binds us all. I wish you and your loved ones all the best. Have yourselves a wonderful experience. Bye-bye.